The air in Boston's Logan Airport was thick with the hum of a cloudy October morning. Sophia Hayes ran through the terminal, her small rollerboard suitcase bouncing precariously over every grout line in the polished floor. At 31, the art conservator was late, a chronic condition, but being late for this particular flight could cost her a career. "Excuse me, so sorry," she repeated, weaving around an elderly tourist couple who blocked the escalator with stoic calm. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't need to look at the screen to know who was calling. "Yes, Ms. Vance. I'm almost at the gate," she lied, clamping the phone between her shoulder and ear while she rummaged through her purse for her boarding pass. "Sophia, this painting is our ticket to the top tier of the art world," Eleanor Vance, the director of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., said in her usual tone, calm, but with an edge of steel that left no doubt as to the gravity of the situation. "If you don't get here in time to stabilize it before the gala—" "I'll make it, I promise," Sophia interrupted, stopping in front of the departure board. "Oh no. What is it?" The director's voice immediately hardened. "Nothing. It's nothing. Just, the gate is farther than I thought. I have to go. I'll call you when I land." Sophia hung up before Eleanor could reply. The truth was, her flight to D.C. was flashing final call. She picked up her pace, mentally cursing the morning optimism that had convinced her she had time to finish one last report on the 17th century canvas awaiting her in Washington. "If I miss this flight, Eleanor will kill me. And if she doesn't, my mother will when she finds out I lost the chance to work on a Rembrandt," she thought, racing down the concourse. When she reached the gate, the last few passengers were just stepping onto the jet bridge. Breathing heavily, she handed her ticket and ID to the smiling gate agent. "Cutting it a little close," the woman commented, scanning her ticket. "Have a nice flight, Miss Hayes." Sophia nodded, still trying to catch her breath. Her curly red hair, which she'd so carefully styled that morning, now fell in damp strands across her face. She entered the jet bridge, the stress of the last few minutes finally giving way to relief. The plane was nearly full. Sophia moved slowly down the narrow aisle, searching for her seat. A glance at her ticket. Row 12, Seat A. It had to be around here. Passengers were stowing their bags, chatting, settling in. Sophia passed through the main cabin and found herself in the small, subtly separated first-class section. 12A, 12A, she muttered under her breath, finally stopping beside an elegant leather seat by the window. The adjacent seat was empty. Sophia crammed her suitcase into the overhead bin, sat down with a sigh of relief and fastened her seatbelt. The plane was almost ready for takeoff, and the seat next to her remained unoccupied. "Maybe I'll get lucky and have the row to myself," she thought, pulling a notebook from her bag filled with notes about the painting waiting for her in D.C. She was so absorbed in her reading that she didn't notice when someone stopped beside her seat. It was a deep, calm voice that finally broke her concentration. "Excuse me, but I'm afraid you're in my seat." Sophia looked up and froze. Standing over her was a tall man in a perfectly tailored navy suit. He was maybe 35, with dark hair dusted with silver at the temples and intense blue eyes that regarded her with a hint of amusement. There was something familiar about his face, though she was certain she'd never met him before. "I'm sorry," she finally managed, feeling a blush creep up her cheeks. The man gestured toward the ticket she was holding. "Seat 12A is mine," he said, the corners of his mouth lifting in a slight half-smile. Sophia glanced at her ticket, then at the number above her seat. Her heart sank. The ticket clearly read 22A, not 12. She was in the wrong row, in the wrong class. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she began, unbuckling her seatbelt and scrambling to her feet. I must have misread it. That was so stupid of me. I'm so sorry." The man, however, didn't seem annoyed. On the contrary, he watched her with a strange glint in his eye. "It's no problem," he said calmly, then leaned in unexpectedly and whispered, so only she could hear, "Actually, I was waiting for you." Sophia froze, her hand gripping the strap of her purse. Had she heard him correctly? Before she could react, the man continued in a normal tone. "You can stay. I'm flying alone anyway." "But," Sophia started, completely thrown. "This is first class. My ticket is for economy." The man shrugged as if it were of no consequence. "Alexander Sterling," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "And really, please stay. Unless you'd prefer a cramped seat between a chatty salesman and a crying baby." He nodded his head toward the back of the plane. Sophia hesitated. Something about this felt strange. First, the man was far too handsome to be randomly sitting next to her on a plane. Second, why would he let a complete stranger take a first-class seat? And third, strangest of all, what did he mean? He was waiting for her. "Sophia Hayes," she finally replied, shaking his hand. It was warm and strong. "But really I should go to my seat." "Miss Hayes, I insist." His voice was firm but polite. "It's only an hour-long flight, and I'll have much more pleasant company than usual." Just then a flight attendant approached them. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her gaze shifting between them. "Yes, everything's perfect," Alexander answered with a charming smile. "My traveling companion was just wondering if she could take the seat next to me, even though her ticket is for the main cabin, but I assure you I have no objection." The flight attendant looked at Sophia, then at Alexander, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Of course, Mr. Sterling, no problem at all," she said quickly. "Enjoy your flight." As the flight attendant walked away, Sophia sank back into the seat, feeling completely lost. "Who are you that flight attendants grant your wishes without blinking?" she asked before she could stop herself. Alexander Sterling settled comfortably into the seat beside her, fastening his seatbelt. "I fly this airline from time to time," he answered evasively. "And you? What brings you to Washington, Miss Hayes?" Sophia frowned. She didn't miss his skillful change of subject, but she decided not to press it. After all, he was letting her stay in first class, a kind, if somewhat odd, gesture. "Work," she answered curtly. "I'm an art conservator. I have to see to a certain painting before a gala on Friday." "Really?" His voice held genuine interest. "Which gallery?" "The National Gallery of Art," she replied, studying him carefully. "And you? Business in the capital?" Before he could answer, the plane began to taxi down the runway. The engines whined louder, and Sophia felt the familiar tightening in her stomach as the aircraft accelerated, lifting off the ground moments later. Alexander gazed out the window as Boston shrank below them. His profile was etched sharply against the bright sky. Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she knew him from somewhere, though she was sure they had never met. She would have remembered a face like that. "Yes, business," he finally answered, turning back to her. "I have a board meeting about a new project. But frankly, your work is more interesting. What piece will you be working on?" Sophia hesitated. The project was confidential, but on the other hand, it would all be public in a few days anyway. "It's one of Rembrandt's lesser-known works," she said at last. "Girl at the Window. It was recently discovered in a private collection and needs immediate conservation before the gala on Friday." Alexander's eyes widened slightly. "Girl at the Window. That painting was thought to have been lost since the Second World War. That's a sensational discovery." Now it was Sophia's turn to be surprised. "You're interested in art?" "You could say that," he replied with a mysterious smile. "But I'm no expert. I just appreciate beautiful things." As he said this, he looked directly into her eyes, and Sophia felt her cheeks flush again. There was an intensity in his gaze that was both disarming and intriguing. "And what are your thoughts on the new director of acquisitions at the National Gallery?" he asked unexpectedly. "I've heard he has a rather controversial approach to acquiring new pieces." Sophia froze. How did he know about the new director? The position hadn't even been officially announced yet. "I don't know who you're talking about," she answered cautiously. "There haven't been any changes to the gallery's board that I'm aware of." Alexander watched her for a moment, as if gauging her reaction, then smiled faintly. "I must be mistaken," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. And how do you like working with Eleanor Vance? I hear she's quite a demanding supervisor. This time, Sophia didn't hide her astonishment. How do you know the director? The art world in this country is small, he replied evasively, and Ms. Vance is a rather well-known figure. Before Sophia could probe further, the flight attendant arrived with a tray of drinks. Alexander asked for sparkling water. Sophia chose coffee. She desperately needed it to clear her head. Once the attendant had gone, Sophia decided to seize the initiative. Mr. Sterling, I can't shake the feeling that you know more about me than you should, she said directly, and that this isn't a chance meeting. What did you mean when you said you were waiting for me? Alexander regarded her thoughtfully for a moment, as if deciding how much he could reveal. I meant exactly what I said, he finally replied. I was waiting to meet you, Miss Hayes. And I'm glad you got your seat wrong. But why? Sophia pressed. We've never met before. Not in person, he admitted. But I'm familiar with your work. Your doctoral dissertation on the conservation techniques of the Dutch masters was enlightening. Sophia felt a strange flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with turbulence. Her dissertation was not widely known outside a small circle of specialists. Who was this man? Are you an art historian? She asked, though her gut told her it was impossible. His posture, his clothes, his self-assurance, everything screamed business, not academia. Alexander chuckled softly. No, definitely not. I'm just an interested observer. Something in his tone told her she wouldn't get any more information, at least for now. She decided to change tactics. And this project you're working on in DC, can you tell me more about it? With pleasure, he said, clearly pleased with the change of subject. It's a revitalization project for a historic building downtown. We want to restore it to its former glory while adapting it for modern use. Sounds interesting, Sophia admitted. Which building? Alexander smiled mysteriously. That's a surprise, but I'm sure you know it. Before she could ask more, the captain announced over the intercom that they were approaching Washington and would begin their descent shortly. Their brief journey was coming to an end. As the plane touched down on the runway at Reagan National, Sophia felt a strange twinge of regret. Despite the initial confusion, her conversation with Alexander had been fascinating. He was intelligent, articulate, and, she couldn't deny it, incredibly handsome and utterly mysterious. Thank you for letting me stay in this seat, she said, unbuckling her seatbelt as the plane taxied to the terminal. It was unexpected. The pleasure was all mine, Alexander replied, standing to retrieve his briefcase. I hope our collaboration will be just as pleasant. Collaboration? Sophia froze mid-motion. What are you talking about? Alexander looked at her with a flicker of surprise that quickly turned to amusement. Ah, my apologies. I may have gotten ahead of myself, he said, handing her a business card. Perhaps you could call me when you have a moment. I have a proposal that might interest you. Sophia took the card, feeling as if she were in a strange dream. On the elegant cream-colored cardstock was printed simply, Alexander Sterling, CEO, Innova Tech, and a phone number. But, she began, not knowing what to say. Alexander leaned in slightly, his face close to hers. We'll be seeing each other soon, Miss Hayes, he said quietly. I'm sure of it. And then, just like that, he headed for the exit, leaving Sophia with a business card in her hand and 1,000 questions in her mind. She stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened, when her phone rang again. This time, she answered, without checking. Where are you? Eleanor Vance's voice was tense. The car has been waiting for you for 10 minutes. I'm on my way, Sophia replied, slipping the business card into her coat pocket. And you won't believe who I just met. Whatever was about to happen, she felt her life had just taken on a disquieting and exciting new momentum. All because she had sat in the wrong seat on an airplane. Sophia burst into the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., like a storm, 40 minutes late. Her mind was still reeling from the mysterious encounter on the plane, but the Rembrandt couldn't wait. Finally, Eleanor Vance, a 60-year-old director with a steel blue gaze and an elegant silver bob, was waiting at the entrance to the conservation lab. I was starting to think the plane went down. "I'm sorry, there were complications," Sophia said, shrugging off her coat and putting on a white lab smock. "There are always complications," Eleanor sighed. "Come on, the girl at the window is waiting." The conservation lab was located in the gallery's lower levels, far from the public eye. This was Sophia's kingdom, a laboratory filled with specialized equipment, microscopes, chemicals and tools. The Rembrandt rested on a special easel, illuminated by lamps that highlighted every crack, every layer of paint. The work depicted a young woman standing by a window, a book in her hand. Her face, bathed in natural light, had a hypnotic quality. "It's worse than I thought," Sophia murmured, pulling on a pair of gloves. "I'm going to need at least 3 days." "You have 2, Eleanor cut in. "The gala on Friday cannot be postponed. We have collectors flying in from all over the world." Sophia sighed and leaned over the painting. At least here, in her element, she felt confident. She knew what to do. "By the way, who did you want to tell me about?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "You mentioned on the phone that you met someone." Sophia hesitated. Should she tell her about the strange encounter with Alexander? "I think I may have met the new director of acquisitions," she said carefully, watching Eleanor's reaction. The older woman's face hardened. "How do you know about that?" "It hasn't been announced yet." "So it's true?" Sophia raised her eyebrows. "Someone new is joining the board?" Eleanor studied her for a moment, as if weighing how much she could say. "There's a board meeting tomorrow. Everything will be made clear then," she said finally. "Now get to work. That painting needs to be ready by Friday." After Eleanor left, Sophia pulled out Alexander's business card. Innova Tech. She'd never heard of it. She grabbed her phone and typed the name into a search engine. The results were staggering. Innova Tech was one of the largest technology holding companies in the country, with offices in 10 states. And Alexander Sterling, its 36-year-old CEO, was on the Forbes list of the 100 wealthiest Americans. "Oh my God," Sophia whispered, staring at the screen. The photo left no doubt. It was the same man from the plane. But why would a tech billionaire be interested in art conservation? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. A young man in a sharp suit entered the lab. "Miss Hayes?" he asked. "I have a delivery for you." He handed her a small box and an envelope, then quickly left. There was no return address. Sophia opened the envelope first. "Thought this might be useful for your work on the girl. I'll be waiting for your call. A.S." Inside the box was a small crystal pocket microscope, the latest model, one Sophia had only read about in professional journals. It cost a fortune. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Dinner tonight at 8? Irongate Restaurant A.S." Sophia looked from the Rembrandt to the message. What was this man up to? And why had she, an art conservator on a modest salary, caught the attention of a billionaire? She replied curtly, "I have to work on the painting. Sorry." The answer came back instantly. "In that case, dinner will come to you. I'll be at the lab at 9. I won't take no for an answer. I promise I'll explain everything." Sophia sighed, putting her phone down. She had a feeling her life was about to get complicated in ways she couldn't have predicted, and it all started with one wrong seat on a plane. She returned to her work on the Rembrandt, but her thoughts kept drifting to the mysterious Alexander Sterling and his strange interest in her. Who was he really, and what did he want from her? The painting seemed to look back at her with a knowing smile, as if the girl in the canvas held the answers to all her questions. At precisely 9 o'clock, the door to the conservation lab opened. Sophia, bent over her microscope, didn't even look up. "This is a restricted area," she said, carefully applying a microscopic amount of solvent to the edge of a paint crack with a fine-tipped brush. "I know," a familiar, deep voice replied. "That's why I requested special clearance." Sophia finally tore her gaze from the microscope. Alexander Sterling stood in the doorway, holding 2 paper bags that emitted an appetizing aroma. He was dressed more casually than in the morning, dark blue jeans and a grey cashmere sweater that highlighted the intense blue of his eyes. "I told you I had to work," she reminded him, pulling off her gloves. "And I told you I'd bring dinner," he replied with a smile, walking closer. "I promised not to get in the way." Sophia sighed. The truth was, she was starving. She had been working non-stop since she'd landed, trying to make up for lost time. "Fine, but I only have 20 minutes, she relented, gesturing to a small table in the corner of the lab. "And you need to explain what this is all about." Alexander laid out the dinner: gourmet sandwiches, a salad, and a bottle of wine. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Alcohol in a conservation lab next to a priceless Rembrandt? My apologies." Alexander looked genuinely chagrined. "I didn't think. We can save the wine for another occasion." Sophia sat across from him, studying him intently. "Why are you here, Mr. Sterling? What do you want from me?" Alexander was silent for a moment, meticulously arranging napkins and silverware. His movements were precise, methodical. "I admire your work," he said at last, "and I have a proposition." "A proposition?" "Yes. But first, I need to get to know you better. This is an unusual situation." Sophia crossed her arms. "I get the feeling you already know me quite well. You've read my dissertation, you know about my job, the Rembrandt project, even about the new director of acquisitions, whom I only just found out about today." Alexander smiled faintly. "I did my research. It's part of my job, gathering information before making a decision." "What kind of decision?" Instead of answering, Alexander glanced at the painting. "A beautiful piece. How is the conservation going?" Sophia hesitated. On one hand, she was irritated by his evasiveness. On the other, she rarely had the chance to discuss her work with someone who seemed genuinely interested. "The varnish has yellowed and cracked," she explained, gesturing toward the canvas. "And there are 2 spots where the paint has started to flake. I have to clean the surface, secure the cracks, and apply a new coat of varnish. It's delicate work." "That's why you're the best," Alexander said, suddenly switching to a more familiar tone. "Your papers on conservation techniques for 17th century Dutch painting are revolutionary." Sophia felt her cheeks grow warm. No one outside a small circle of specialists had ever read her articles. "Where does your interest in art come from?" she asked, trying to deflect the attention from herself. "My father was a collector," he answered, and a new note entered his voice, one she hadn't heard before. "Not a wealthy one, but he had a good eye. I grew up surrounded by paintings. Art is important to me." For the first time, he seemed truly sincere, without any mystery or games. "And you?" he asked. "What made you become a conservator instead of an art historian or an artist?" Sophia reached for a sandwich, considering her answer. "I've always liked saving things," she said finally. "As a kid, I used to fix old dolls, then furniture, books. Conservation is more than just art history. It's about bringing something back to life. When I work on a painting, I feel like a doctor saving a patient." Alexander watched her intently, as if her every word was golden. "Fascinating," he said quietly. "Most people only see the final result. Few understand the process." They ate in silence for a moment. Sophia felt the atmosphere between them shift. It became less tense, more intimate. "So," she finally began, "this proposition." Alexander set down his fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and looked her directly in the eye. "How well do you know the history of the building we're in right now?" Sophia was surprised by the change of topic. "The National Gallery. It's the old Mellon building, 1940s neoclassical. What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," Alexander answered, "because I just bought it." Sophia choked on a piece of her sandwich. "You did what?" she exclaimed after catching her breath. "That's impossible. It's a landmark, federal property." "Not exactly." Alexander reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file of documents. The building was owned by a private foundation that leased it to the government for the gallery for years. The foundation went bankrupt, and I made the best offer. Sophia scanned the documents in disbelief. It all seemed legitimate. Deed of ownership, contracts, official letters. But what about the gallery? What about us? My job? And that's where my proposition comes in. Alexander leaned forward, his face now close to hers. I want you to be the chief conservator for my private collection, and to help me transform this building into the most advanced art museum in the country. Sophia stared at him, stunned. What about the current collection, the staff? The current collection stays. The government will lease it from me, instead of leasing the building from the foundation. No one will lose their job. On the contrary, I want to hire more specialists. Why me? Sophia asked. There are many conservators with more experience. Not true, he said firmly. You're the best, and you have something the others don't, passion. I see it in your eyes when you talk about your work. Sophia felt overwhelmed. It was too much information at once. And Eleanor? Does she know? The director has known for a week. We'll be making the official announcement at the board meeting tomorrow. So that's how you know so much about me, Sophia realized suddenly. Eleanor told you? Alexander shook his head. No, I knew about you long before that. I've been following your career for 2 years, ever since that conference in London where you presented your research on pigments. Sophia tried to recall the conference, but she couldn't remember seeing him there. You were there? Not in person, but I watched the recording. I was intrigued. A strange glint appeared in his eyes that made Sophia feel butterflies in her stomach. That's a little unsettling, she said, trying to remain calm. Following someone's career for 2 years. I apologize if that sounded wrong. Alexander seemed genuinely embarrassed. I didn't mean anything by it, I just admire your work. And when the opportunity to hire you came up, I couldn't pass it up. Sophia didn't know what to think. On one hand, the offer was tempting. A bigger budget, a better lab, work with private collections she would normally never have access to. On the other, everything was happening so fast, so unexpectedly. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Alexander agreed, but we don't have much. The board meeting is at 10 tomorrow morning. I'd like to be able to announce that you've accepted the position. That's blackmail, Sophia pointed out. It's business, he countered with a smile. But I genuinely want you to agree, not to be forced into it. He stood and began to gather the remnants of their dinner. Think about it. I'll pay you double your current salary. You'll get a new lab with state-of-the-art equipment and the freedom to choose your projects. Sophia stood as well, feeling her head spin from the flood of information. And if I refuse? Alexander looked at her with a strange expression, a mix of disappointment and determination. Then I'll have to find someone else. But I truly believe you are the best person for this job. He walked to the door but stopped before leaving. There's one more thing, he said, turning back. My collection includes a painting that requires special attention. A painting that I think will interest you very much. What painting? Sophia asked, intrigued despite herself. Boy with an Apple, by Rembrandt. The companion piece to Girl at the Window, believed to have been lost for centuries. Sophia held her breath. If he was telling the truth, it would be one of the greatest discoveries in the art world. You're lying, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Never about art, he replied seriously. The painting is real, and it needs your help. With that he left, leaving Sophia alone with the Rembrandt and 1,000 thoughts swirling in her head. She sat down heavily in her chair, staring at Girl at the Window. Could there really be a companion piece? And if so, could she possibly refuse the chance to work on such a discovery? Suddenly, her eyes caught something odd in the corner of the painting. A tiny detail she hadn't noticed before. She reached for the microscope Alexander had given her and leaned over the canvas. What she saw made her heart beat faster. In the shadows, in the lower right corner of the painting, Rembrandt had painted a small, barely visible figure of a boy holding an apple. It was unmistakably a sketch, a preview of a second painting. "My God," Sophia whispered. He wasn't lying. She knew then what her answer would be at the meeting tomorrow, but did she have any idea what she was truly agreeing to? The conference room at the National Gallery of Art filled promptly at 10 in the morning. Around the long mahogany table sat the members of the board, serious men and women in middle age, dressed in subdued suits and dresses. Sophia, seated in a corner of the room, felt out of place in her simple grey sweater and jeans. Eleanor Vance opened the meeting, her voice calm, though Sophia noticed a tension in her posture. "Thank you all for coming," the director began. "As you know, I've called this extraordinary board meeting to introduce some important changes facing our institution." The doors opened, and Alexander Sterling walked in. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and looked as though he had just stepped off the cover of a business magazine. A few people whispered among themselves, recognizing him. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Alexander Sterling, CEO of Innovatech," Eleanor continued, "and as of today, the new owner of the building we are in." A murmur rippled through the room. Sophia watched the surprised and, in some cases, alarmed faces of the gallery staff. She'd had all night to get used to the news, but for most, it was a shock. Alexander walked to the front of the room and stood beside Eleanor. He surveyed the crowd, his gaze pausing on Sophia for a fraction of a second. He gave her a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "Good morning, everyone," he began in a confident voice. "I know this news may be surprising to many of you, so I'd like to clarify a few things right away. First, the National Gallery of Art will remain in this building. I have signed a long-term lease agreement with the federal government. Second, no one will lose their job. On the contrary, I plan to expand the gallery's operations, which will mean creating new positions." The tension in the room eased slightly, though a sense of unease still lingered. "Mr. Sterling has a vision to transform our gallery into the most modern art museum in the country," Eleanor interjected. "He will provide the funding for the renovations we so desperately need, as well as for the purchase of new equipment." "In exchange for what?" asked an older man sitting near Sophia. It was Professor Miller, the long-standing curator of the Northern European Painting Department. Alexander looked at him intently. "A good question, Professor. In return, I want to merge my private collection with the gallery's holdings. We will create a joint exhibition space, combining the best of both worlds." "What collection?" the professor pressed. "This is the first I'm hearing of you as an art collector." Sophia noticed Alexander's hands clench slightly. He had touched a nerve. "My father collected art his entire life," he answered calmly. "After his death, I continued his passion, albeit discreetly. Now the time has come to share these works with the world." "And what exactly is in this collection?" Miller persisted. "Among other things, Boy with an Apple by Rembrandt," Alexander replied, and a hush fell over the room. "A painting thought to be lost, the companion piece to Girl at the Window, which Ms. Hayes is currently working on." All eyes turned to Sophia, who felt her cheeks burn. "That's impossible," Professor Miller spoke up again. "That painting, if it ever existed, was lost during the Second World War. And yet, it exists," Alexander said with conviction, "and I can prove it. But first, I'd like to present the final element of my plan." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an elegant black folder. "This is the partnership agreement between Innovatech and the National Gallery of Art. All the details are outlined within, but the most significant change concerns the management structure. As of today, we are creating a new position, Chief Conservator and Director of Acquisitions. The person in this role will be responsible for assessing the condition of all works in the combined collection and for making decisions on new purchases." Eleanor nodded. "The board has already approved this change. All that remains is to announce who will fill the position." Sophia held her breath. Even though she knew what was coming, she still felt a knot of anxiety. "I am pleased to announce that this position will be filled by Ms. Sophia Hayes," Alexander said, smiling in her direction. One of the finest conservators in the field, and the person who first discovered the link between girl at the window and boy with an apple. Again, all eyes turned to Sophia. She felt a mix of pride, embarrassment, and fear. It was all happening so fast. "This is an outrage," Professor Miller shot to his feet. "Ms. Hayes is an excellent conservator, but she has no management experience. There are far more suitable candidates for this position." "Such as yourself, Professor?" Alexander asked with a hint of irony. "I assure you, this choice was carefully considered. Ms. Hayes possesses not only the technical expertise, but also the intuition and fresh perspective that we need." Sophia stood, feeling she had to say something. "Professor Miller, I understand your reservations," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. "I had similar ones myself when Mr. Sterling first made this offer. But please, give me a chance. I have no intention of making any decisions alone. I will be consulting with experts, including yourself." The professor looked at her with a mixture of resentment and resignation before sitting back down. "Very well," Eleanor said. "Now that that's settled, I'd like Mr. Sterling to say a few words about his plans for the building's renovation." The meeting continued for another hour. Alexander presented a detailed plan for modernizing the gallery that impressed even the skeptics. When it finally concluded, most people came up to congratulate Sophia, though she could detect a hint of insincerity in some of their smiles. "Congratulations, Sophia," Professor Miller said, approaching her last. "I hope Mr. Sterling knows what he's doing in trusting you with this position." "Thank you, Professor," she replied, trying to ignore the sting in his words. "I'll be counting on your help and advice." Once the room had cleared, only Sophia, Eleanor, and Alexander remained. "Well, that's over with," Eleanor sighed. "Now the real work begins." "Sophia, could you come to my office in an hour?" Alexander asked. "I'd like to show you the documentation for Boy with an Apple and discuss the details of your contract." "Of course," she answered, feeling a strange thrill of excitement. "I'll be there." After Alexander left, Eleanor looked at her carefully. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" she asked quietly. "This man may be rich, but no one in our world knows him. He just appears out of nowhere with a collection that includes a lost masterpiece. It's suspicious." Sophia hesitated. "I don't know, Eleanor, but I saw the proof of the second painting's existence. There's a sketch on Girl at the Window, exactly where he said it would be." "Be careful," the director warned her. "Big money often comes with big lies." An hour later, Sophia stood before the door of a luxurious suite at the Jefferson Hotel, where Alexander had set up a temporary office. She knocked, a sense of unease creeping over her. "Come in," she heard his voice say. The suite was impressive. A spacious living room with a view over the city, elegant furniture, and on the walls, paintings. Lots of paintings. Sophia recognized a few names: Canaletto, Turner, and even a small sketch that looked like a Vermeer. "I see you've noticed a piece of my collection," Alexander said, walking toward her. He had changed into dark jeans and a black sweater, looking younger and less formal than at the meeting. "Are these originals?" Sophia asked, unable to tear her eyes from the Vermeer sketch. "Of course," he replied, standing beside her. "It's an early study for Girl with a Pearl Earring. I bought it at an auction in Amsterdam 5 years ago." "Incredible," she whispered, leaning in to get a better look at the delicate lines. "I can see his style, but at the same time, there's something different here, more raw." "Exactly." Alexander smiled with appreciation. "Very few people notice that. Vermeer was still finding his style, experimenting." Sophia straightened up and met his gaze. "All right, you've proven you know your art, but that doesn't explain where you got Boy with an Apple." Alexander sighed and gestured to the sofa. "Please sit. It's a long story." Once they were seated, Alexander picked up a tablet from the coffee table. "My father, Theodore Sterling, was an art historian," he began, scrolling through files. "Not well known, he worked mostly as an appraiser for auction houses, but he was obsessed with Rembrandt, particularly his lost works." He found what he was looking for and handed the tablet to Sophia. On the screen was a photo of an older man in a small, cluttered study, surrounded by books and papers. In 2007, he received a message from a collector in Argentina, an elderly man, a descendant of European immigrants, who claimed to have a painting in his collection that his grandfather had brought from Europe before the war. A painting he suspected was a Rembrandt. Alexander swiped the screen, revealing another photo, a yellowed, grimy painting of a young boy holding an apple. My father flew to Buenos Aires and immediately recognized the style. But he needed proof. For the next 3 years, he researched the painting's provenance, the collector's family history, and ran every possible test. By 2010, he was certain. It was an authentic Rembrandt, the companion piece to Girl at the Window. "What happened?" Sophia asked, captivated by the story. Alexander's expression darkened. Before he could publish his findings, he got sick. Pancreatic cancer. He died 6 months later. "I'm sorry," Sophia said sincerely. "Before he died, he gave me all his research and made me promise to finish what he started, but I wasn't ready. I was busy building my company, and then I think I was afraid I couldn't do it, that I wouldn't be able to prove what my father had discovered." Sophia looked at him with a new understanding. She no longer saw arrogance or mystery, just a man carrying the weight of a promise made to his dying father. "You bought the painting from the man in Argentina?" she asked. "Yes, 2 years ago. It cost a fortune, but it was worth it. Since then, I've been searching for the right conservator, someone who could not only restore the painting to its former glory, but also help prove its authenticity. And then you found me," Sophia finished for him. "Exactly. When I read your paper on new methods for identifying pigments used by Rembrandt, I knew you were the one." Sophia continued to scroll through the photos on the tablet. Documents, test results, old photographs. Everything seemed to support Alexander's story. "Where is the painting now?" she finally asked. "In a bank vault. Waiting for you," he replied, his eyes shining with excitement. "We can go see it tomorrow if you'd like." Sophia handed him back the tablet, her mind racing. If all this was true, she was facing the opportunity of a lifetime, to work on a lost masterpiece, a discovery that could change art history. "Why did you buy the gallery building?" she asked suddenly. "That seems extreme." Alexander chuckled softly. "You're right. It wasn't necessary. But when I heard the foundation was going bankrupt, I thought, why not? The building is beautiful, historic, perfect for a museum. And besides," he hesitated for a moment, "I wanted to make sure you had the best possible conditions to work in, and that you'd stay in Washington for a while." His words hung in the air between them, full of unspoken meaning. "This is all insane," Sophia said, shaking her head. "Buying buildings, a lost Rembrandt, offering me this position. Sometimes you have to do something insane to achieve something great," he answered calmly. "So, what do you say? Shall we go see Boy with an Apple tomorrow?" Sophia knew she should be cautious, that she should verify every detail of his story, but curiosity and excitement were stronger. "All right," she agreed. "But first I have to finish my work on Girl at the Window. I promised Eleanor it would be ready by Friday." "Of course," Alexander nodded. "Finish your commitments, and then we'll start something new. Together." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Sophia shook it. Their hands met, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her. Whatever happened next, she knew her life would never be the same. As she stepped out of the hotel and onto the bustling street, she felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. An unknown number. "We need to speak with you regarding Alexander Sterling and a Rembrandt painting. Urgent. Special Agent Mark Dawson, FBI Art Crime Team." Sophia stopped in her tracks, staring at the phone's screen. Her heart pounded in her chest. Was Alexander's entire story a lie? Had she just walked into a trap? The FBI's Washington field office was a grey, monumental building that seemed to radiate authority. Sophia passed through the security checkpoint, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. After a brief phone call with Agent Dawson, she had agreed to meet him that same day. Ms. Hayes, a slim man in his 40s, dressed in a grey suit, was waiting for her at the reception desk. Special Agent Mark Dawson, thank you for coming. He shook her hand. His grip was firm and decisive. In his eyes, Sophia saw a mixture of intelligence and weariness. This way, please, he said, leading her down a corridor. We can talk in my office. The agent's office was small and sparsely furnished. Diplomas and photos of historic artifacts hung on the walls. Files and documents were piled high on his desk. Dawson gestured to a chair opposite him. Tea? Coffee? He asked. No, thank you, Sophia replied, sitting stiffly. I'd rather get straight to the point. What is this about? Dawson sat behind his desk and looked at her carefully. Ms. Hayes, how long have you known Alexander Sterling? Since yesterday, she answered honestly. We met by chance on a flight from Boston. By chance? Dawson raised an eyebrow. Well, I thought so. Now I'm not so sure. The agent opened a folder in front of him and took out several photos. Is this the painting Mr. Sterling told you about? He asked, showing her a photograph of Boy with an Apple. Sophia studied the picture and nodded. Yes, that's it. Where did you get this? From our colleagues at Interpol, Dawson replied. This painting has been on their most wanted list for 10 years. It was stolen from a private collection in Argentina in 2013. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. Alexander said his father bought it legally. His father, Theodore Sterling, was indeed in Argentina in 2007, the agent confirmed, but he didn't buy the painting. The owner refused to sell. 6 years later, the painting vanished, and the owner was found dead in his home. Sophia felt a wave of nausea. Could Alexander have lied to her so fundamentally? Are you suggesting that Alexander was involved in the theft? In a murder, Dawson shrugged. We don't have proof of that, but we do know that for the past few years he's been trying to introduce this painting to the market. He contacts experts, conservators, trying to build a provenance story that will legitimize his version of events. And his father, Theodore Sterling, was he really an art historian? Yes, the agent confirmed. And he did die of cancer in 2010, but there's no indication he ever owned Boy with an Apple. Sophia tried to piece it all together. Alexander's story was crumbling before her eyes. What about the gallery building? Did he really buy it? Unfortunately, yes, Dawson sighed. That part is true. The foundation did go bankrupt, and Sterling made the best offer. The man has immense financial resources. So, what do you want from me? Sophia asked, struggling to remain calm. The agent leaned forward across his desk. We need your help, Ms. Hayes. We want to catch Sterling red-handed when he tries to sell the stolen painting, and you are our best chance. Sophia froze. You want me to work with the police against him? Exactly, Dawson confirmed. Tomorrow, when he shows you the painting, you'll be wearing a wire. We need a recording of Sterling admitting he knows the painting's illegal origins. Sophia felt her hands begin to tremble. This was too much. Yesterday she was a normal conservator, and now she was supposed to participate in a sting operation. And if I refuse? Dawson sighed. Then we'll have to find another way. But frankly, without your help, our chances decrease dramatically. Sterling is careful, intelligent, and has the resources to cover his tracks. Sophia stood and walked to the window. From the 4th floor, she could see the grey rooftops of Washington. Her thoughts were in a turmoil. How do I know you're the one telling the truth? She finally asked, turning back to the agent. Maybe you're the one trying to deceive me, not Alexander. Dawson nodded, as if he'd expected the question. A fair point, he conceded. Here. He handed her a file of documents. Interpol reports, case files from Argentina, an international arrest warrant. Everything looked authentic. You can verify all of this. Call the Argentine police, call Interpol, call whomever you like. All the contact information is in there. Sophia leafed through the documents, a growing certainty that the agent was telling the truth, solidifying in her gut. But what did that mean for her? "I have one more question," she said, putting the file down. "Why did Alexander choose me? There are plenty of conservators with more experience." Dawson looked her straight in the eye. "Because you're young, talented, and alone," he said, his tone softening. "You have no family who would worry if you suddenly left the country. You have a reputation in your field, but you're not so famous that your disappearance would cause an international scandal. You are the perfect candidate for someone who needs an expert they can also easily control." And the agent's words hit her like a slap. Was she really such an obvious target, such an easy victim? "And you think that he," she stammered, unable to finish the thought. "I think Sterling is willing to exploit any weakness, any emotion, to achieve his goal," Dawson answered. "Did you notice how quickly he moved from a professional relationship to something more personal?" Sophia remembered the dinner in her lab, the way Alexander had looked at her, his hints about a shared future. Was it all calculated? "I need time to think," she said at last. "Of course," Dawson agreed, "but we don't have much. If Sterling senses something is wrong, he'll disappear, and so will the painting, a priceless work of art that belongs to the world." Sophia nodded, gathering her things. "I'll let you know by this evening," she promised. "Thank you." The agent handed her his card. "And Miss Hayes, please be careful. Sterling could be dangerous." When she left the federal building, Washington was already bathed in the late afternoon twilight. Sophia walked the streets aimlessly, trying to sort through her thoughts. Should she trust Dawson? Was Alexander really a thief and a potential murderer? Her phone rang. Alexander Sterling appeared on the screen. "Hello?" she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sophia, I'm so glad I caught you." Alexander's voice was enthusiastic. "I just picked up Boy with an apple from the bank. It's here in my suite. I thought maybe you'd like to see it tonight instead of waiting until tomorrow." Sophia stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. This was her chance. She could meet him right away without the preparation of a police operation. But was she ready? "Sophia, are you there?" Alexander's voice broke through her thoughts. "Yes, sorry," she replied quickly. "Tonight, I don't know if I can. I have to finish my work on Girl at the Window." "Oh, I understand," he said, a note of disappointment in his voice. "But I thought seeing the companion piece might help you with your work on the girl. The two pieces are connected." Sophia hesitated. He was right. From a conservator's perspective, seeing the other painting would be incredibly helpful. "All right," she finally agreed. "What time?" 8. I'll order dinner." "I'd prefer earlier." "And no dinner," she answered quickly. "I really have to get back to work." "Fine," Alexander conceded. 6:30? That will give us enough time to look at the painting." "Okay. See you then." As soon as she hung up, she dialed Agent Dawson's number. "Dawson," he answered on the first ring. "It's Sophia Hayes. I'm meeting Sterling tonight at 6:30. He's going to show me the painting." There was a moment of silence on the line. "That's too soon," the agent said finally. "We won't have time to prep you, to fit you with the equipment." "I don't need equipment," Sophia interrupted. "I just want to see the painting and talk to him." "It's too dangerous. You should." "It's my decision." She cut him off. "I want to know if he lied about everything, or just about the painting." "I want to hear it from him." Dawson sighed heavily. "All right, but promise me you'll be careful. Don't confront him directly, and call me the second you leave the hotel." "I promise," Sophia said, and hung up. She had 2 hours until her meeting with Alexander. 2 hours to prepare for a confrontation with a man who was likely not who he claimed to be. At 6:25, Sophia stood before the door to Alexander's suite at the Jefferson. She took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Alexander smiled when he saw her, his blue eyes sparkling with excitement. "Come in, please," he said, stepping aside to let her pass. "I was just getting everything ready." Sophia entered the suite, her eyes scanning the room. Everything looked the same as before. The elegant furniture, the art collection on the walls. The only difference was an easel by the window, holding a painting draped in a white cloth. "Wine?" Alexander asked, walking over to the bar. No, thank you, Sophia declined. As I said, I can't stay long. Of course. Alexander nodded in understanding. In that case, let's get straight to the main event. He walked over to the easel and looked at Sophia with a serious expression. What you're about to see has been considered lost for years. A work that, in theory, shouldn't exist. But my father believed he would find it. And he was right. With those words, he removed the white cloth, unveiling the painting. Sophia gasped. Before her was a portrait of a young boy in dark clothing, holding a red apple in his hand. The background was dark, the boy's face illuminated in Rembrandt's characteristic style. The painting was covered in a layer of dust and grime, and the paint was flaking in some places. But even in its current state, the mastery of the work was undeniable. "What do you think?" Alexander asked, watching her reaction. Sophia moved closer, studying the piece with professional focus. Despite everything she now knew, she couldn't suppress her expert interest. The composition, the light, the technique, it all points to Rembrandt, she said finally. But I would need to run tests to be certain. Of course, Alexander agreed. You'll have all the tools you need at your disposal. Sophia turned to him, trying to hide her emotions. Can you tell me more about the painting's provenance? She asked innocently. How exactly did it come into your father's possession? Alexander gestured to the sofa. Let's sit, it's a long story. It's a long... As they sat, Alexander began his tale. The same one she had heard before, about the Argentine collector, his father's journey, the years of research. Sophia listened intently, searching for loopholes, inconsistencies, anything that would confirm Agent Dawson's story. So your father bought the painting from this collector? She asked when he finished. What was his name? Eduardo Vasquez, Alexander answered without hesitation, a descendant of immigrants who moved to Argentina after the First World War. And he agreed to sell the painting? Sophia pressed. A family treasure like that? Alexander hesitated for a fraction of a second, so briefly she almost missed it. He was an old man, with no children. He was worried about what would happen to the painting after he died. My father offered to take care of its conservation and research. That convinced him. I see, Sophia nodded. And do you have any documents confirming the transaction? A bill of sale, a receipt? Alexander frowned. Why are you asking? Don't you trust me? Sophia felt her heart race, but she maintained a calm tone. It's standard procedure for works of this caliber. I'll need the complete documentation before I can begin conservation work. Alexander watched her for a moment, then stood and walked to a desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. It's all here, he said, handing her the documents. The sales agreement, expert reports, test results. Sophia looked through the papers, trying not to show her surprise. The documents looked authentic. There were contracts, signatures, notarized seals. These expert reports, she noted, scanning the test results. They're very detailed. Did your father have access to this kind of equipment? No, Alexander admitted. These tests were done after his death, at my request. I wanted to be certain before I showed the painting to the world. Sophia checked the dates on the documents. The most recent tests had been conducted 6 months ago at a lab in Zurich. And they all confirm its authenticity, she murmured, more to herself than to him. Exactly. Alexander smiled with satisfaction. Boy with an apple is real, and together you and I will save it. Sophia put the documents down, a growing sense of unease washing over her. Everything Alexander said sounded coherent and convincing. The documents looked authentic, and yet Agent Dawson had been just as persuasive. May I take a picture of the painting? She asked, reaching for her phone. For comparative purposes with Girl at the Window? Of course, Alexander agreed. Just please don't share it with anyone. I want the official unveiling to be a surprise. Sophia walked over to the painting and took several detailed photos, paying close attention to the style, technique, and details. If it was a forgery, it was an incredibly well-executed one. Thank you, she said, putting her phone away. This will be very helpful for my work on the girl. I'm glad. Alexander moved closer, standing right beside her. Do you see the similarities? Yes, she admitted honestly. The style, the composition, the way the paint is applied, everything indicates that both paintings were done by the same hand. I knew you'd see it. His voice was filled with pride, as if it were his own personal achievement. Now, do you understand why I wanted you, specifically, to handle the conservation? Sophia turned to him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. She could see every detail of his face, a small scar above his left eyebrow, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the intense blue of his irises. Yes, I understand, she said quietly, but I still don't understand why you chose me. There are many conservators with more experience. Alexander smiled faintly, his gaze lingering on her lips for a moment. I already told you, he answered just as quietly. You're the best, and you have a passion that others lack. He took a step toward her, their faces now dangerously close. Sophia could smell his scent, a subtle cologne and something else, something personal and undefined. Is that all it is? She asked, fighting the tremor in her voice. My qualifications. Alexander hesitated, and something she couldn't interpret flickered in his eyes. No, he admitted at last, it's not just that. His hand gently touched her cheek, and Sophia, despite everything she knew, despite Dawson's warnings, felt a shiver run down her spine. Was it possible that the man looking at her this way was nothing more than a con artist? Alexander, she began, not knowing what she wanted to say. She was cut off by the ringing of a phone. Alexander blinked, as if waking from a trance, and pulled his hand away. I'm sorry, he said, reaching into his pocket. I have to take this. He walked a few steps away, and Sophia took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. What was happening to her? How could she react this way to a man who was probably lying to her? Yes, I understand, she heard him say. No, it can't wait. I'll be there in 5 minutes. He hung up and looked at her with an apologetic smile. Forgive me, but I have to go. An urgent business matter. Can we finish this conversation tomorrow? Of course, Sophia replied, trying to hide her relief. I should be getting back to work anyway. As she gathered her things, she noticed Alexander covering the painting with the white cloth. You're leaving it here? She asked, gesturing to Boy with an apple. In the hotel? Just for the night, he answered, carefully draping the cloth over the canvas. I'll move it to a special vault tomorrow, but don't worry, the suite has top-level security. Sophia nodded, but something in her expression must have betrayed her unease, because Alexander walked over and gently took her hands in his. Is everything all right? He asked, looking her straight in the eye. You seem on edge. It's been a long day, she answered evasively, and a lot has happened. I need some time to process it all. Alexander smiled with understanding. Of course. Get some rest. Everything will be clearer tomorrow. As they said goodbye at the door, Alexander hesitated, as if he wanted to kiss her, but in the end he only squeezed her hand. Until tomorrow, Sophia, he said softly. Until tomorrow, she replied and left, feeling her heart beat an unsteady rhythm. Once she was on the street, she pulled out her phone and dialed Agent Dawson's number. Well? He asked without preamble as soon as he picked up. The painting is in his suite, Sophia said, looking around to make sure no one was listening. And honestly, I don't know what to think. Everything looks authentic, the painting, the documents, his story. He's a professional, Dawson replied. Of course, everything looks authentic. Did you get pictures? Yes, a few. I'll send them to you. Good. What about Sterling? Did he say anything suspicious? Sophia hesitated, remembering the moment they stood so close, his hand on her cheek, the intensity in his gaze. No, she said finally. Nothing specific. But I think he trusts me, and that might be our chance. What are you proposing? The agent's voice was cautious. Sophia took a deep breath. I'll cooperate with you, she said firmly, but on my terms. I want to conduct my own analysis of the painting first. If it turns out to be a forgery, or if it was definitely stolen, I'll help you catch him. But if there's even a shadow of a chance he's telling the truth—" "Ms. Hayes," Dawson interrupted, "this man is a manipulator. Don't be fooled by his charm. He's using you to get what he wants." "Maybe," Sophia conceded, "but I can also use him to get what I want, the truth about this painting." There was silence on the other end of the line. "All right," the agent finally agreed, "but I'll have my people watching you, and if I feel you're in any danger, I'm intervening, regardless of your analysis." "Deal," Sophia said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to the gallery. I have a painting to save." After she hung up, she felt a strange mix of emotions: uncertainty, excitement, fear. She didn't know who was telling the truth, Alexander or Dawson. She didn't know who she could trust, but one thing she knew for sure: Boy with an Apple existed. And regardless of its history, it was a masterpiece that deserved to be saved. And she was an art conservator. Saving masterpieces was her job. With that thought, she headed toward the gallery, where Girl at the Window was waiting for her, the other piece of a puzzle whose solution could change everything. The gala at the National Gallery of Art was the event of the season. Elegantly dressed guests, flutes of champagne, the flash of cameras. At the center of it all was Rembrandt's Girl at the Window, gleaming with fresh color after Sophia's masterful conservation. She stood in a corner of the hall, wearing a simple black dress, observing people's reactions to her work. But her mind was elsewhere, with Boy with an Apple, and with Alexander, whom she hadn't seen in 2 days. "Magnificent work!" Eleanor's voice pulled her from her thoughts. The only other time that Rembrandt looked so vibrant was the day he finished it. "Thank you," Sophia replied, forcing a smile. "Alexander isn't coming," Eleanor added quietly. "Word is he left the country, urgent business." Sophia's heart sank. Had he figured her out? Did he know about her meeting with Dawson? Just then her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "I apologize for the sudden departure. We will resume our conversation in a few days. Take care of the boy. He's in your apartment. A." Sophia held her breath. In her apartment? How was that possible? "Is everything all right?" Eleanor asked, noticing her reaction. Yes, Sophia lied. "I just need to check something in the lab." She slipped out of the hall, and as soon as she was alone, she dialed Dawson's number. "Sterling is gone," she said without preamble, "and he's apparently left the painting in my apartment." "I know," the agent replied. "We have your place under surveillance. We're waiting for him to come back for it." "How did he know where I live?" "A man with his resources can find out anything," Dawson sighed. "But we haven't been idle either. We examined the documents you photographed. All of them are forgeries." Sophia felt a sharp pang of disappointment. So he had lied. "And the painting?" she asked. "Is it definitely the one stolen from Argentina?" "Without a doubt," Dawson confirmed. "Interpol matched your photos to their documentation. It's the one." Sophia leaned against the wall, feeling her strength drain away. "What now?" "Go back to the gala," the agent instructed. "Act normal. We'll handle the rest." When she returned to the hall, the party was in full swing. No one had noticed her brief absence. She mechanically accepted congratulations, smiled, and feigned interest in conversations about art. But her thoughts were consumed by Alexander and the painting. Was it all a lie? Every look, every smile, every word. Was he really just a criminal who had wanted to use her? Later that evening, as the last guest departed, Sophia was left alone with Eleanor. "Something's going on," the older woman said, handing her a glass of wine. "And it has to do with Alexander." Sophia hesitated, but she felt an urgent need to confide in someone. "The painting is stolen," she said quietly. "Boy with an Apple. It was stolen from Argentina 10 years ago." Eleanor didn't look surprised. "I suspected something wasn't right," she admitted. "A mysterious billionaire with a lost masterpiece? It was too good to be true." The police are waiting for him, Sophia continued, for when he comes back for the painting. And you? Eleanor asked. How do you feel? Sophia took a sip of wine, trying to sort through her emotions. I don't know, she admitted honestly. I feel deceived, used. But at the same time you have feelings for him, Eleanor finished for her. It's understandable. He was charming, handsome, intelligent, and he seemed genuinely interested in you and your work. Exactly, Sophia sighed. How do you tell what was real and what was an act? Eleanor placed a hand on her shoulder. Sometimes you can't. But the important thing is that you remain true to yourself. Don't let this experience change your passion for art and for saving beautiful things. Sophia smiled gratefully. Eleanor was right. No matter who Alexander was, she was still the same Sophia, an art conservator who loved her job. Late that night, Sophia returned to her apartment building. Instead of going inside, she called Dawson. I'm outside, she said. What do I do? Go in as you normally would, the agent instructed. We have people inside and out. You're safe. When she opened the door, the apartment was dark and silent. On the living room table sat a white wrapped package, the painting. Next to it was an envelope. Sophia looked around, searching for the hidden agents, but she saw no one. She slowly approached the table and opened the envelope. Sophia, I know you spoke with the police. I don't blame you. It was the smart thing to do. But I want you to know the truth. Yes, Boy with an Apple was stolen, but not by me. I bought it on the black market, unaware of its history. By the time I found out the truth, it was too late. I had paid too much, invested too much. I lied to you about many things, but not about one. I truly admire your work, and what I felt, that was real. I'm leaving the painting. Let it go back where it belongs, and I will disappear for a while. Maybe our paths will cross again someday. This time, without the lies. Sophia stood motionless, staring at the letter. Was this just another lie? She walked over to the painting and carefully uncovered the canvas. Boy with an Apple stared back at her calmly, holding the red fruit in his hand. The masterpiece, thought lost for centuries, was here, in her apartment. She reached for her phone and dialed Dawson. The painting is here, she said, and a letter from Alexander. We'll be right there, the agent replied. Don't touch anything. 15 minutes later, her apartment was full of federal agents. Dawson personally secured the painting and the letter. Is this his handwriting? He asked, showing her the envelope. Yes, Sophia confirmed. It's him. Do you think he's telling the truth? That he didn't know it was stolen? Sophia looked at Boy with an Apple, now being carefully packed by specialists. I don't know, she answered honestly, but he gave it back. That has to mean something, right? Dawson smiled a little condescendingly. Or he realized he was cornered, and this is his attempt to save his own skin, he noted. In any case, thank you for your help. Without you, this masterpiece might have been lost for another decade. When the agents finally left, taking the painting with them, Sophia was alone in her empty apartment. She sat on the sofa, feeling a strange void. For a few days, her life had been a whirlwind adventure, a mysterious billionaire, a lost masterpiece, a federal investigation. And now, everything was back to normal. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Hello, she answered, her heart pounding. Miss Hayes? A woman's voice with a Spanish accent said, This is Maria Vasquez, Eduardo Vasquez's daughter. I'm calling about my father's painting, Boy with an Apple. Sophia sat up straight. Yes, I'm listening. The police told me you were instrumental in recovering the painting. I wanted to thank you and to ask, would you be willing to conserve it? It's in poor condition, and my father always said it should be restored by the very best. But Sophia was confused. I thought your father was deceased, and that he didn't have any children. The woman on the other end chuckled softly. My father is alive and well, though very old, and he has 3 children. That man Sterling, he made up many things. But he was not wrong that the painting needs to be saved. Sophia felt something inside her break, another lie. And yet, I would be honored to work on the painting, she agreed. It's a privilege to work on such a masterpiece. After the call, Sophia walked to the window and looked out at the Washington night. In 3 months, she would fly to Buenos Aires to begin the conservation of Boy with an Apple. Then she would return to the States, to her job at the gallery, where Eleanor had already promised her a larger lab. And Alexander? He had vanished, just as he'd promised. Maybe one day he would reappear. Maybe she would get on a plane and find him sitting next to her again. Maybe this time there would be no lies. But even if she never saw him again, she knew one thing for certain. This adventure had changed her forever. It had shown her that she was stronger than she thought, that she could face down any challenge, and that her one true love, art, and the saving of it, would always be there for her, no matter what. She smiled at her reflection in the glass. Tomorrow was a new day, and who knew what surprises it might bring.